Hi, boys and girls. How are you? It was so good to see some of you guys this morning. What I'm going to do, this is for social studies. I'm going to post this to, I feel like I'm like really tall. I'm going to go ahead and post this to our social studies assignment. The baby's crying, Corey. Yes. Sorry, guys. I don't know how to stop this thing. Can you? Sorry, my son is crying, and I don't know how to pause this and come back. I guess I could try. Okay, so sorry. I figured out how to unpause it. That's nice. Okay. I think it's still okay. So I got my PowerPoint. I pulled that up. So I'm going to go ahead and hopefully this works. And I'm just going to kind of walk you through the Mayan civilization. We're just going to do the Mayans today, and I'm going to try to make it as short as possible. But I do want to give you a little bit of an idea of how the Mayan civilization worked. Okay, so hopefully this works out for us. So I'm going to go ahead and blow this up. Aha, this works. Fantastic. Awesome. All right, so first thing is you're probably snickering just because you see this picture on the front. But this would be a stereotypical what Mayan civilization, what they would look like. You would see that they would have the big headdresses, they would have tattoos, they'd have jewels and beads decorating them. Physically, the Mayans, they believed that flat noses, flat foreheads were beautiful. And so they would put things on their heads to make their noses and their foreheads flat. I have a picture of that, but I'm not sure if I have it on this PowerPoint, so I'll have to see if I look for it. You can probably see, I don't know if you can see my mouse or anything, but you know, they had jewels in their noses, they had nose earrings. I mean, this was what typical Mayans looked like back in that time period. Okay, obviously they didn't have photographs or cameras back then. So this was probably a reenactment or a reenactment of something for the Mayans culture, because they wouldn't have cameras back then. So a lot of the pictures you're going to see are going to be photographs that are reenacted, or you're going to see illustrations or paintings that believe is what they thought that they looked like back in that time period. Okay, so this is where the Mayans were located. They lived in the Yucatan Peninsula. So this is in the Central America area. So you've got South America here, you have North America here. All right, so they lived in the highland and lowlands in that area. There were mountains and valleys there too. And so they were definitely, they were kind of known as the jungle people, because, I mean, if you think about it, your equator runs right through there. So they were super hot. They had a super hot atmosphere, super hot environment. And so they adapted to that. So, again, they were kind of known as the jungle people. And that's where a lot of our rainforests were, if you think about that, if you remember that from geography. So this is an actual picture of Mayan ruins. I'm not real sure which one this is, but this is an actual picture. They believe, archaeologists, just like I said up here, archaeologists believe that the Mayans began working the land as early as 1800 BC. And so if you are familiar, BC means before Christ. They built small farming villages. Some of those villages grew into big cities. The warriors of the time, they fought over the land, they fought over power. There was no ruler that actually united the entire Mayan kingdom. So they were very particular about their land owning and their power, which we're going to talk about here in a minute when we talk about their different ranks, social status, which is on this too. And this information you can use in your chart too. You can just replay it if you want to and add it to your chart. It's totally fine with me. I'm getting it from the book that I have and from how I've taught it the last few years, although this is just a little weird. This is Tikal, or Tikal, I guess. I've always called it Tikal. This is in Guatemala. This is in the South America, Central America area. And this will be how they would build their religious centers. So this photo that you see is probably an example of one of their religious centers, a place where they went to do rituals, where they went to worship whatever gods they were worshiping at that time. So some of those cities that were built had really great palaces and very high staircases, and sometimes at the top there would be sacrificial tables and things like that. So you see a lot of that type of building in the Mayan ruins. And we do have Mayan ruins. I've been to some. If I was at school, I would show you some pictures, but I don't have my pictures with me. But I went to Belize a few years ago, and I was able to go up the stairs of something very similar to this temple that you see right here to call. It was funny because I was going up the stairs, and like my tour guide at the time, I pushed a button. Sorry. Let me see if I can go back. The tour guide at the time told us, be careful, there's green moss. And of course, right when he said that, I slipped on the green moss and I slid all the way down. Yeah, a little embarrassing. So they did build their temples, their pyramids with limestone. Again, the pyramids, at the top of the pyramids were the temples, and that's where most of the Mayan priests and kings had their rituals, their religious rituals. And, the Mayans were polytheistic, which means they worshiped many different gods and goddesses. So the Mayan honored their gods with frequent religious festivities. They were honoring their gods that were important to them. The Mayans believed heaven was where the gods reside, and they had 3 gods that they honored. And then they believed earth was for the living, and then they also believed that there was an underworld. So they did believe in different gods, more than one god, and they had a god for the sun, they had a god for the moon, they had a god for death, they had a god for life, they had a god for a lot of different things. So as the Mayans continued to build and grow their cities, farmers needed to make sure they were producing more food, so they had to find ways to farm. They had to find places that they could do that as well. So they definitely farmed on the sides of hills. They carved into the hills terraces, which I'm going to show you a picture of in this next slide. They built raised fields in the lowlands. They burned trees and plants in the forest to clear the land for farming. They called that slash and burn, where they burnt the trees, and then the ash of those trees turned into some like a soil that would help grow the crops. They moved good soil around to areas that had poor soil. They used the slash and burn technique. They dug water systems. They made irrigation systems to bring water to dry areas. Sometimes they made trenches. Sometimes they would, a lot of the time it was trenches, but they also used the terrace system as well. And we'll talk about that with the Incas as well, because they used those as well. The terraces looked like this. And they were on the sides of hills, and you could see they're just kind of like, they look like steps. And they specifically built these because when the water would come down, the water would trickle down through the steps so that all of the crops were getting water. You can see you can see this really picture right here. Okay, it shows you like some of like the trench work that they might have done. So that was one way that they irrigated their crops, which is what a lot of the early civilizations, even the Inca, did too. They found ways to irrigate their crops by getting them water. I'm in the way on this one, sorry. Some of the agriculture. By using these irrigation techniques, they grew corn, beans, squash. They traded their extra food between the highland, lowland people and people in Central America. They received goods that they couldn't produce themselves, so they did a lot of bartering. So they traded their corn, their beans, their squash for feathers and cocoa beans and jade. And cocoa beans were really popular back in that time period. So they had great value. They used that as money. And it was kind of like the wealthiest people were the only ones that typically got the cocoa beans. They also bartered and traded for obsidian, which was like a volcanic rock that they also used for money. Again, products that they traded: cocoa beans, feathers, obsidian. Those are just some pictures of some of those to kind of illustrate that for you. Trying to make sure I don't miss anything, and I'm trying to make sure it doesn't, This is, again, I talked to you about it being I don't know if I can move this. Oh, I can. I can move me. Ooh, I bet that messed you up. Polytheistic, which means they worship many gods. We already kind of talked about that. They thought that their priests could influence the gods. So the Mayan ruler was named a Pascal. He ruled the Mayans for 68 years. Like other Mayan rulers, he was the priest as well as a warrior. The priest kings, like the Pascal, they killed animals and sometimes people as offerings to the gods. I know all the boys out there are like, yeah, sacrifices. We'll talk about that in a minute. The city of Palikine, probably pronouncing that wrong, built a temple that was used to record his achievements. So he was the ruler. Pascal ruled for 68 years in the Mayan civilization. I think that is if that is not a painting, then that is definitely like a recreation of, what a typical Mayan priest would look like. Obviously, they didn't have cameras, remember. Oh, I messed up. Haha, there we go. All right, boys, I know you're gonna love this, but I told you, when you go up to that temple and you end up at the top, where you go up the stairs and you end up at the top of the temple, the Mayans wanted to keep their gods happy and they wanted to prevent disasters from happening. So they believed that the gods needed blood. So the priests and the kings, like the Mayan king Pascal, would kill animals, and sometimes they would even kill people as offerings to the gods. And they would walk them up the stairs, depending on who it was they were sacrificing or what animal they were sacrificing, and they would use that temple, use that table, religious table or whatever, and they would sacrifice them to the gods because they wanted to keep the gods happy. That was part of their polytheistic religion. That would be an illustration of sacrifices to the gods. So, this is, again, just an illustration. It's a person. Doesn't look very happy. You've got some of the different types of gods surrounding this king priest here, sacrificing of the human. Aren't you glad you don't live in that time period? Yuck. All right, some things that the Mayans are famous for. This is really important. Some things that they are famous for, things that they're well known for. One thing that one of the achievements that the Mayans had was they created, let me find it. Okay. They created a sacred writing called hieroglyphics. And so it's a writing system. And each of their pictures stood for objects or sounds. So some of hieroglyphics stood for whole ideas, such as life or happiness. And they were carved into the stone columns. They were carved into the temples. They were recorded in record books called the Codex. The The Mayans made books out of animal hide and soft bark that they folded like fans. And the Mayan book, the Codex, were written by the gods or the rulers. And if you look online, you could probably find some Mayan writing that they have translated from that codex. A lot of their hieroglyphics depicted historical events, religious ideas, and the daily lives of the Mayan people. So I think this next slide, some examples of hieroglyphics. And this would be things that you would see all over civilization, all over their city, all over the buildings that they built. This would be what you would see. They're written, their sacred writing. And of course, they're also known for their astronomy. They were amazing mathematicians. You probably heard a few years ago where I guess there was the last day, the Mayan calendar ended and they thought, oh, this is the end of the world. This is where they kind of got this from. So the Mayans created a calendar system. They created a way to count their days, I guess. Sorry, I moved my computer again. And so they knew the exact moon phases. They were able to predict the sun and moon eclipses. They created very precise 365-day calendars for harvesting their crops and things like that. They also had a 120-day calendar for religious events. So, so again, their calendars were so simple that even the uneducated people could write the numbers. They could even figure them out. And I think I have a picture of that here in just a minute to show you like how those numbers worked on their calendars. But it was a type of number system that they were known for. Yeah, the end of the world 2012, that's what they thought. Obviously, we bypassed that. But their calendar officially ended in 2012. So everybody thought that the world was going to end because the Mayan calendar ended. Obviously, it didn't. Yeah, we don't have to talk too much about that because it obviously didn't happen. This is an example of a Mayan calendar. Definitely looks way different than what we typically see a calendar look like. You're probably thinking, how do you read that? Well, I'm not a Mayan scholar, so I don't really know how you read it, but it has a lot to do with the number system that they created. And it's right here, right there. This is the number system that they created. So a single dot represents the number 1. To write the numbers 2, 3, and 4, the Mayan system of writing required simply adding more dots. So that's kind of how their writing system worked. The horizontal lines, they represented the number 5. To show the number 10, 15, or 20, they added more lines. The Mayan understood the concept of zero. So very few civilizations in the world did at that time. So the Mayans used a hieroglyphic of an empty shell to write a 0. So that would be your empty shell right up here. So to create the numbers other than 0, 1, or 5, the Mayans stacked shells, dots, or horizontal lines together. So that's how they would read this, their number system, which isn't too difficult. I mean, it's kind of like codes. You guys probably do that before. Something that you guys have read, I believe, in one of the ReadWorks articles was their recreation, things that they did. One of the most famous things that they did was they have Mayan ball games. And I don't think I have anything on here about this, but this would be this was something that they did on their free time, things that they like to play. However, it's not like today. I mean, in typical basketball, football games, baseball games, we don't play to the death. These guys did. They played to the death. So the players tried to hit a solid rubber ball through a stone ring on the side of the wall. I'll show you a picture here in a minute. And they had padded elbows and wrists and hips, and people from all levels of society would watch the games. Slaves, land, and homes could be won, lost during a game. So you could lose your house if you lost the game, or you could win a house if you won the game. The losing teams were Traditionally, they were sacrificed, and then the captain of the defeated team was beheaded. I'm totally just imagining Brody listening to this and thinking, dude, or Landon, like, if you lost this ball game, guys, you were beheaded. So that's a pretty terrible ending to a game. Brady, how do you like that one? Glavin? Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't think I'd want to participate in that ball game. This is an example. Again, it's not a real photograph. It is a recreated photograph, but this is an example of the ring that was on the side, and it's kind of a different version of basketball, or maybe the first version of basketball almost. The Mayans helped with creating that game, although I'm gladly don't behead anybody anymore. So the mystery of the Mayans. What happened to these guys? So the collapse of the Mayan civilization is one of like the greatest mysteries ever, because we still don't really know what happened. We know that the cities were mysteriously abandoned, but we don't know why. They thrived for 600 years, and then they just abandoned their cities to the jungle. But we never figured out why they did that. There's a lot of possible reasons that the Mayans abandoned their cities, but again, we don't really know why. So some of the possible reasons that we've heard of were things that I've stated here. Some people believe maybe their population grew too fast for farming systems. Maybe they had long periods of drought, causing crop failures. Some people believe that maybe there was a disease that wiped them out. They thought maybe they had widespread warfare. The wars were very bloody back in that time, so hand-to-hand fighting with clubs and spears. So maybe that kind of weakened the civilization, leading to its end. They also some people believe that Spanish, when the Spanish conquistadors arrived, the Spanish explorers in the Americas, they believe maybe that the invaders from Central America helped to destroy the city-state. So they don't really know what happened to the Mayans. And the reason why they don't know what happened is because when the Spanish arrived in Americas, 600 years later, they were scared of the Mayans. They didn't know anything about them. And so they burned all of their codices that they found, all of their documents that the Mayans had created. The Spanish burned them, believing them to contain the writings of the devil. So some of the Spanish did save a small amount of the Mayan languages in like dictionaries. That's why we know a little bit about them. But the loss of those written codices has made finding clues to shed light on the reason why they disappeared so difficult, because their history was burned, because the Spanish just were unfamiliar with them. So, yeah, we don't really know what happened to these guys. I kind of wish we did, but we don't. And that is nothing. I can't get it to play, so we're not going to worry about that. So, this is the end of our Mayan quick lesson. So I hope it wasn't too much information for you, but I think we've got pretty much all of the good stuff. So you don't have to do anything with this right now. Just kind of keep it in your head. You can use it for your chart if you want to. If that helps you at all, you can go back and pause and whatever. But you don't have anything to do with this. Tomorrow I will put the Incas up. So you'll get the Incas tomorrow, and that also can be something you can use on your chart. Okay. All right. I will see you guys later. I hope you enjoyed the crash course in Mayan history. All right. Talk to you later. Bye, guys.